Here, you can share mine. Mama always says food tastes better when you don't eat it alone." The voice was soft, almost musical, as 8-year-old Coralie Jensen slid half of her simple sandwich across the cafeteria table toward the boy who sat alone every day, staring at his empty hands with an expression that made her heart hurt. It was the third time this week she'd noticed him without lunch, and though the other children whispered that Thorne Calloway was the rich kid whose father drove a fancy car, Coralie saw something different. She saw loneliness wearing expensive clothes, hunger behind careful silence. Thorne looked up, his gray eyes widening with surprise and something that looked dangerously close to tears. I can't take your food. You need it." "I have plenty," Coralie lied gently, though her stomach was already protesting the half portion. Her father had taught her that kindness sometimes required small sacrifices, that helping others mattered more than being comfortable. "Besides, my mama packed extra today. She always does." That wasn't true either. Coralie's mother ran a tiny home kitchen business, selling affordable meals to construction workers and delivery drivers, often giving food away to those who couldn't pay. Her father operated a small roadside garage, fixing vehicles for elderly neighbors and ambulance drivers without charging them, saying, "Humanity is bigger than money." They lived simply, paycheck to paycheck, but their home overflowed with warmth and laughter and the kind of love that makes poverty feel less heavy. Thorne accepted the sandwich with trembling hands, taking small, careful bites as if trying to make it last. Coralie watched him eat, then casually sipped her water and pretended she wasn't hungry, chatting brightly about the birds she'd fed that morning before school, sparrows and pigeons who waited for her on the windowsill, the stray dog who'd had puppies behind the market, the jar of coins she was saving labeled "Help Others" in crayon letters. What Coralie didn't know, what nobody at Riverside Elementary knew, was that Thorne Calloway's life was a beautiful lie told by expensive things. Yes, his father was a successful civil engineer. Yes, they lived in a large house with marble floors and imported furniture. But 2 years ago, on Thorne's 6th birthday, everything had shattered. They'd been shopping for party supplies when a drunk driver ran a red light. Thorne's mother saw the car coming, saw her son frozen in the crosswalk, and made a choice that mothers make without thinking. She shoved Thorne out of the path and took the impact herself. She died before the ambulance arrived, her last breath spent whispering, my baby," while Thorne screamed her name. His father, Marcus Calloway, never recovered. The grief calcified into something cold and brittle. He blamed himself for not being faster, blamed fate for being cruel, and somewhere deep in the wounded places he never voiced aloud, he blamed the son who'd survived when his wife hadn't. Marcus knew it was irrational, knew it was unfair, but knowing didn't stop the feeling. So he withdrew. He provided everything material, the big house, private school tuition, expensive clothes, but he couldn't provide presents. He left early for work, returned late, spoke in clipped sentences about homework and grades, and avoided looking directly at Thorne, because those eyes were his mother's eyes. That smile was her smile, and the resemblance was a knife that twisted daily. The household maid, Mrs. Vernon, was supposed to care for Thorne, but she was careless and detached, more interested in her phone and soap operas than in 8-year-old's needs. She'd forget to pack lunches, ignore his questions about homework, leave him alone for hours while she gossiped with neighbors. Thorne learned not to ask for things, learned to be invisible, learned that needing was the same as being burdensome. Until Coralie started sharing her lunch. It became their daily ritual. Every afternoon, Coralie would split whatever simple meal her mother had packed, half a roti with vegetables, a homemade cupcake, rice and lentils in a small container, and slide it across the table with her gentle smile. Sometimes she only had an apple and crackers, but she still shared. And slowly, day by day, Thorn began to smile again. Not the polite, careful smile he used with adults, but real joy that lit his entire face. "Why are you so nice to me?" he asked, the question loaded with more confusion than an 8-year-old should carry. Coralie tilted her head, considering. "Because you look sad sometimes, and my papa says when you see someone sad, you should try to make them happy if you can. It's not hard to share lunch, but maybe it's hard to be alone all the time." She was right, but Thorn couldn't find words to explain just how right, so he just nodded and ate the half sandwich she had given him, treasuring every bite because it tasted like someone cared. What neither child knew was that Coralie's daily sharing came at a cost. She'd started making small handmade items at home, friendship bracelets woven from colorful thread, bookmarks decorated with pressed flowers, tiny origami birds, and selling them to classmates for pocket change. She used the money to buy extra lunch ingredients, telling her mother she was eating more at school so her parents wouldn't worry or feel guilty. Some days she went home genuinely hungry, but the look on Thorn's face when she shared made the empty stomach feel worthwhile. Her mother, Ilara, began to notice her daughter eating less at dinner, claiming she'd had big lunches. And her father, Roman, found the Help Others jar suspiciously empty despite Coralie's usual diligence in saving coins. They suspected something but didn't pry, trusting their daughter's kind heart and teaching her that generosity sometimes required sacrifice. One afternoon, as Marcus Calloway arrived unusually early for pickup, he sat in his luxury sedan watching through the cafeteria window. What he saw made his breath catch. That small girl with the worn backpack and mended uniform, splitting her meager lunch, watching his son eat with an expression of such pure compassion it hurt to witness. And Thorn, his neglected, lonely son, smiling with a happiness Marcus hadn't seen since before the accident. Marcus felt something crack inside his carefully constructed emotional walls. Shame, hot and acidic, flooded through him. He'd given his son everything money could buy, but nothing a child actually needed. And this stranger, this little girl who clearly had so little herself, was filling gaps he'd been too broken to notice existed. But Marcus didn't act on that revelation, not then. Instead, he buried it deeper, told himself he'd deal with it later, and made a decision that would haunt him for years. He accepted a job transfer to another city, telling himself it was a promotion too good to refuse, not admitting he was running from the uncomfortable mirror this situation held up to his failures. 2 weeks later, Thorn was gone. No goodbye, no explanation, just an empty desk and confused classmates asking where he went. Coralie waited at the lunch table that first day, her sandwich split and ready, watching the cafeteria door with hope that slowly withered. After a week, she accepted he wasn't coming back. She cried quietly that night, not understanding why her friend had left, wondering if she'd done something wrong. "Some people come into our lives for a season," her father said gently, stroking her hair. "But the kindness you showed him, that stays with him forever, Beta. You planted seeds of compassion. You'll never know how they might grow." Coralie tried to take comfort in that, though her heart ached. She kept sharing her lunch with other students who seemed to need it, kept feeding birds and stray animals, kept filling her Help Others jar. The years passed. She finished elementary school, middle school, high school, always maintaining that core of kindness her parents had nurtured. Meanwhile, in another city, Thorn carried Coralie's compassion like a torch through his dark years. His father remained emotionally distant, but Thorn found purpose in remembering the girl who'd shared when she had so little. He excelled in school, driven by a desire to honor that early kindness by becoming someone who could help others. He studied civil engineering like his father, but also business, planning to build something meaningful. In college, he started a small program providing free lunches to students struggling financially, remembering what hunger felt like, what it meant when someone noticed and cared.
After graduation, he founded a construction company with a mission, building schools and community centers in underserved areas, employing practices that prioritized humanity over pure profit. By the time he was 20, Thorne Calloway had become quietly successful. By 25, his company had built 17 schools across 3 states. And by 30, he'd established the foundation that would define his life's work. 12 years after leaving Riverside Elementary, Thorne returned for the school's 50th anniversary celebration. The institution was struggling financially, considering closure, and he'd learned about it through a social media campaign by desperate alumni. Standing in the old cafeteria, renovated but still familiar, memories flooded back with overwhelming intensity. The principal introduced him as a generous donor and distinguished alumnus, and Thorne took the microphone with hands that trembled slightly. The audience expected a standard corporate speech about education and opportunity. What they got instead was raw, honest truth. "I came to this school as a broken child," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "My mother had died saving my life, and my father couldn't look at me without remembering his loss. I was 8 years old, emotionally abandoned, and often literally hungry because the people paid to care for me didn't." The room went completely silent. This wasn't the polished corporate speech anyone expected. "Every day I sat in that cafeteria, over there, pointing to the corner table, pretending I wasn't starving, pretending I didn't matter. And every day a girl named Coralie Jensen shared her lunch with me. She had so little herself, I knew that even then. I saw her clothes were mended, her backpack worn, her portions small, but she split them anyway. She smiled and talked about feeding birds and saving coins to help others, and she made me feel like I mattered when I was certain I didn't." In the audience, a woman in her early 20s gasped softly. Coralie Jensen, now a social worker running after-school programs for at-risk youth, had attended out of nostalgia and couldn't believe what she was hearing.
"I never got to say goodbye," Thorne said, his voice cracking slightly. "My father transferred and I just disappeared. But I never forgot her. Every lunch I provided through my programs, every scholarship I funded, every building I designed with children's needs in mind, all of it traces back to that little girl who taught me that kindness doesn't require wealth, it requires a willing heart." He paused, gathering himself. "One day I saw her pretending to eat. She'd given me her food and was sipping water, smiling like she wasn't hungry. That image has haunted me for 12 years. She was sacrificing when she had nothing to spare, and I, who had everything materially, was taking from her. That's when I understood that privilege without compassion is just expensive emptiness." Thorne's voice grew stronger, more determined. "Which is why I'm here to announce the Little Hands Kindness Foundation. We're establishing a permanent free lunch program, not just for this school, but for 20 schools across the district. No child should have to pretend they're not hungry. No child's education should be disrupted by something as preventable as food insecurity." The audience erupted in applause, but Thorne held up his hand. "Additionally, we're creating scholarships specifically for children of mechanics, food service workers, laborers, the people who keep our communities running but rarely get recognized. Because a mechanic's daughter taught me more about humanity than any classroom ever could." After the speech, Coralie approached him with tears streaming down her face. Thorne recognized her instantly, older now, but with the same gentle eyes, the same warm smile that had saved him years ago. "You remembered," Coralie whispered. "Every day," Thorne replied, his own eyes bright. "Coralie, you saved my life, not dramatically, but truly. You showed a broken kid that kindness still existed, that someone could see past the surface to the person underneath. I became who I am because you shared your lunch." "I didn't do anything special," Coralie protested. "You looked sad and hungry. It seemed obvious to help."
That's exactly what made it special, Thorne said gently. You saw obvious need and responded with obvious compassion. Most people don't. They get comfortable with others' suffering, rationalize why it's not their problem. You were 8 years old and understood something most adults never learn, that we're all responsible for each other. Coralie smiled through her tears. My parents taught me that. My papa would fix cars for free for people who couldn't afford repairs. My mama fed workers who couldn't pay. They showed me that money is just a tool, but kindness is a choice. I'd like to meet them, to thank them for raising someone who made such a difference. And I'd like to hire you, if you're interested, to run the Foundation's youth programs. Nobody understands what struggling kids need better than someone who's been there and still chose compassion. What unfolded over the following months was a partnership built on shared values and mutual respect. Coralie brought her social work expertise and genuine understanding of poverty's challenges. Thorne provided resources and business acumen. Together, they built programs that addressed not just hunger, but the whole ecosystem of childhood need: tutoring, mentorship, mental health support, family assistance. Coralie's parents met Thorne and welcomed him like a son, their small home filled with the same warmth that had shaped their daughter. Roman repaired Thorne's company vehicles at cost, refusing to profit from someone doing good work. Ilara cooked meals for Foundation events, the same simple, delicious food she'd packed in Coralie's lunches years ago. And Marcus Calloway, Thorne's father, finally faced the truth that his son's foundation work had been forcing him to confront. He reached out, hesitant and ashamed, seeking therapy for the first time, slowly working to rebuild the relationship he'd neglected. It was difficult, painful work, but Thorne gave him the same grace Coralie had shown years ago. Not instant forgiveness, but patient space for growth. 2 years after that anniversary speech, the Little Hands Kindness Foundation served over 10,000 students daily. The program had expanded to include parent workshops, job placement assistance, and emergency family support. And at the center of it all remained the simple truth that started everything: one child sharing lunch with another.
At the Foundation's anniversary gala, Thorne invited Coralie to speak. She stood before donors and community leaders, still humble despite her accomplishments, and shared her perspective. When I was 8, I didn't think about changing the world, she said softly. I just saw my friend was hungry and I had a sandwich. It seemed simple. But I've learned that most important things are simple. We just complicate them. Seeing people's needs, responding with what we have, not waiting until we have more or until someone else acts first, just sharing the sandwich. She paused, her voice growing emotional. Thorne says I saved him, but he saved me too. He showed me that small kindnesses aren't small at all. They're seeds that grow in ways we never imagine, touching lives we'll never meet, creating ripples that spread far beyond the initial splash. Every child who eats through our programs, every parent who gets support, every family that makes it through a hard month, they're all connected to one little girl splitting a sandwich because it seemed like the right thing to do. Coralie's eyes found Thorne across the room. That's what I want people to understand. You don't need to be wealthy to be generous. You don't need power to be kind. You just need to notice when someone's struggling and choose connection over comfort. Every single person here has the power to be someone's Coralie, to share their sandwich, to make someone feel seen and valued. That's how we change the world, not through grand gestures, but through daily choices to show up for each other. The room was silent except for the sound of people quietly crying, moved by the simple profundity of her words. Thorne stood and, without speaking, walked to Coralie and embraced her, not romantically, but with the pure gratitude of someone whose life had been fundamentally shaped by unexpected compassion. Thank you, he whispered, for teaching me that the measure of a life isn't what we accumulate, but what we give away. For being kind when you had every reason not to be. For sharing your sandwich and changing everything. Because kindness is never wasted, never forgotten, never truly small. A child's simple act of sharing can ripple across years and lives, teaching lessons that textbooks never could, planting seeds that bloom into forests of compassion. We never know whose life we might transform by simply noticing their need and responding with whatever we have to give. The greatest changes often begin with the smallest gestures, a split sandwich, a gentle smile, a choice to see someone's humanity and honor it with our own. That's how hope spreads. That's how healing happens. That's how one 8-year-old girl with a kind heart and modest lunch changed a broken boy, a struggling school, and eventually thousands of lives, simply by sharing what she had and showing that love multiplies when we divide it.
If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.